What's up, everyone? And thank you so much for dropping into another episode of the Path to Freedom podcast. Was hoping that this wouldn't happen, but I'm not even 5 seconds in, and my voice is already cracking like I'm a 13-year-old going through puberty. So sorry that my voice is kind of on its way out, but wanted to get a short kind of solo episode out this week. For those of you that have been listening for a while, you probably know that uh, through the franchise consulting work that I do, I'm part of a network of franchise consultants called Franchoice. And as part of Franchoice, we have relationships with hundreds of the leading franchise brands across the country. Everything from emerging brands that are really just coming onto the scene and probably not going to be on anyone's radar yet, um, to very well established and mature brands with extensive track records and great brand recognition at the consumer level, and everything in between. So a great variety of brands in terms of their timeline, their uh, level of maturity. Great variety of brands in terms of just different types of businesses, right? I mean, again, if you've listened to me for a while, you probably know that um, I mainly specialize in non-food franchises. So I work with a handful of food concepts, but not very many. That's not my, expertise per se. But outside of that, very wide variety of just different types of franchises across different industries. And I'll go into a little more detail here in a couple minutes in terms of just some examples of, different types of franchises that I have relationships with. But all of this is through Franchoice, the network that I'm a part of. And it's maybe not something that I've spent a whole lot of time talking about, on the podcast, but I think it's actually, relevant for folks to know, in the world of franchising, there's no shortage of franchise consultants or franchise brokers out there that essentially provide the same services that I provide. And so you have networks. It's pretty similar to how you see real estate structured, right, where you've got these different networks or groups of real estate agents. You've got Caldwell Banker, you've got Keller Williams, groups like that out there. So we have kind of a similar structure to that in the world of franchise consulting. And so Franchoice is one of these networks. And I knew for quite some time coming into my consulting, starting my own consulting business, that this was something that I wanted to do. I worked for numerous franchisors earlier in my career, and most of what I did working for these franchisors was selling franchises for the brands that I worked with. And so through that, I got exposure to, franchise consultants. That's where a lot of our leads for prospective franchisees came from. And so, I got to work with franchise consultants from a lot of these different industries out there. So I had some really good perspective in terms of, when I was ready to go start my own consulting firm, which network I would prefer to plug into. And for me, Franchoice was a no-brainer. And I'll expand on that in a moment. And, I'll also kind of tie all this together in terms of why I think it's important for, you as the listener, or, you as someone that's potentially, considering exploring franchise ownership and maybe working with a consultant. But anyways, I got to work with, most, probably not all, but most of the franchise consulting networks that are out there. And when I decided I was ready to start my consulting firm, I knew without doubt that Franchoice was the network that I wanted to go be a part of. And before I go any further, let me be very clear, none of this is to say that, the other networks out there are not good and don't have, good franchise consultants that are a part of them and don't, work with great franchise brands. Most of the other consulting networks out there work with many of the brands that we have relationships with through franchise. So just wanted to make that clear. But there were, a couple of reasons that, I really wanted to make sure that if I was going to go start a consulting business, I was going to be able to be a part of franchise. And so the way the relationships work with franchise, at least, is, I'm independent. I own my own business. I'm not employed by franchise. They do not pay me any money directly, but I get to benefit from um, the relationships that they have with these franchisors. And that's really valuable because franchise has been around for 25 plus years at this point, has a stellar reputation, a stellar track record. And so they attract brands that want to work with franchise. And that gives franchise and us as consultants with franchise the luxury of being very selective with the brands that we want to work with. And so, I saw this when I was on the franchise sales and development side. I would go to, a franchise conference, and, we typically work with anywhere from 250 to 275, brands at a time, which, again, as I alluded to earlier, gives us great variety, gives us great options to where we can really dig in with the people that we're working with and understand, what's driving them and everything else that we go through, and make some really good recommendations for them. But some of the other networks I would go to would have 500, 600, maybe even more than that brands. And you may initially think, well, hey, the more options, the better. Well, maybe, but my view on it is that having having a smaller number of more selective brands to work with is much better for me as a consultant, and it allows me to do a much better job for the people that I'm working with. Because, look, at the end of the day, franchising's no different from anything else in this world, in the sense that there are great franchise companies out there, there are terrible franchise companies out there, and there's everything in between, right? So not all franchises are created equally. And I will be the first to say that, there are a lot of really great franchises out there that franchise does not have a relationship with. There's a lot of great franchises out there that they don't work with brokers or consultants, period. Right. So I'm not sitting here saying, hey, if it's a brand that franchise, this network I'm a part of, doesn't have a relationship, it's automatically a bad franchise. But, I take my role as a consultant very seriously, in the sense that, if someone's trusting me to make intelligent recommendations to them based on what I've learned about them personally, and say, hey, we've spent a lot of time talking, and, I think I have a pretty good sense of, what you're looking to get out of business ownership and what that would ideally look like for you. Here are, some specific franchises that I'm recommending to you based on all of that. I feel the responsibility to be very knowledgeable and very familiar with the companies that I'm recommending. And for me to spend the time that I feel is required to get to know 500 or 600 plus brands that well, I would never have the bandwidth to do it. And I think most other franchise consultants, are in the same boat. So all of this is going to a point, but And just, that was one of the things that attracted me to franchise, was the fact that, they work with a fewer number of very, very high quality brands. And, in that, because of franchise's reputation and track record over the last 25 plus years, we do have some brands that work exclusively with franchise, meaning, we as consultants have the ability to refer people to these brands, but the case may be that other franchise consultants and other networks don't have that same relationship. So that's, in some cases advantageous as well. Just to give folks out there a sense of how convoluted some of this can get, some of the networks of franchise consultants are actually franchises themselves. So the consultants or the brokers are franchisees for the franchisor, which is essentially kind of the network, or the equivalent of franchise, the network that I'm a part of. Franchise is not that, right? I'm not a franchisee. I did not pay any money to join franchise. So some, not all, but some of the other networks out there, the consultants are actually franchisees, and they paid money to do that, which is, look, not necessarily a bad thing, right? But for me, I was very attracted to the culture that franchise has created. Just like with the brands, franchise is at a place where they're able to be very selective about who they bring in as consultants. So while there's no fee to join, franchise is really looking for, their consultants to have extensive franchise experience, right? Most of us, own franchises ourselves, or, have owned franchises in the past. Many of us have worked on the franchisor side as well. So we have this real life experience and this perspective that really allows us to help our candidates, or the people that we're working with, see realistically what it's going to take to be successful. And I think that's really important in this, right? I think, there's a lot of people out there, whether it be people selling franchises or brokers, that, just want to make it sound easier than it really is going to be. And it can be amazing, right? I mean, I'm walking proof of the benefit of, business ownership and doing it through a franchise that's structured the right way, because it helps you avoid mistakes. It helps you ramp the business up quicker. It helps you, get to a point where, you've got income coming in that's, changing your lifestyle much sooner than we likely would have had we just gone off and done something on our own. But it took a lot of hard work, right? And if we can do it, others can too. But, I think people need a realistic understanding of, what's going to be required of them to get the type of results that they're looking for. And it's not always going to be smooth sailing, and it's sure as hell not going to be passive, right? So anyways, I'm getting a little off topic, but I think that was an important point to make there. But I was very attracted to the fact that franchise has a great network of consultants that all have great real life experience in franchising. And, them becoming a franchise consultant was not their first foray into franchising, or, their first experience as a business owner in general, because of the role that we play in this process for people, and helping to advise them through, a very big decision of, investing in a franchise and starting a business. So why is any of this important to you as a listener, or, someone that, may be considering exploring franchise ownership? Well, here's right. Number one, the quality of the brands that, someone like myself has access to through franchise. Um, some of the fastest growing franchise brands in the country, and brands like these that you know kind of explode off of the starting line but continue to grow, that's for a reason, right? Some of the most established brands, brand names that, most of you listening would recognize, and then everything in between. So just access to really high quality brands that, a lot of them are not out there spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, to market their franchise opportunities online or through other means. They'd rather work through groups of consultants doing what I do because of the type of candidate that we're able to bring them, and the process and all the work that we do up front, to make sure that we're making smart recommendations, right? We bring them the type of people that they're really looking for, and vice versa for the individuals that we work with. So in a lot of cases, I'm able to, introduce people that I'm working with to brands that, probably definitely were not on their radar, but very likely would not have ended up on their radar, had they not worked with me and us gone through our process. So, that's a big part of it, and why I wanted to just, share a little bit more details of, kind of how my relationship with franchise, how it works, and why it's beneficial. Another is I referenced the culture, with franchise earlier in terms of the caliber of consultants. And you know just like in any good franchise, even though franchise is not a franchise, but just like in any good franchise, there is so much value in the shared learning that comes from the group. We as franchise consultants with franchise are all doing the same thing, right? We're all, helping to guide people through the same process. And so there is a lot of, collective knowledge and experience that, someone like myself can benefit from. Right. And also, I mentioned earlier, needing to have a high level of confidence in, the brands that I'm recommending to someone, even at, 200, 250 different brands. It's hard for me to know all of those brands as well as I probably should. So, if there is a brand that maybe I'm not as familiar with, I can go to someone else in franchise that may have a much better, relationship or understanding with that brand. Maybe they've placed other people into that brand in the past. We all try to stay in touch with people that we've placed so we can get, that kind of behind the scenes feedback from people that are now actually, franchisees. So I can get really good insight and intel based off of that. That benefits all of the people that I'm working with through this process. The fact that, I'm a part of this network that, has so many other experienced franchise professionals, and, are helping others in the same way that I'm helping people. We share, we learn from each other, and that, absolutely benefits the folks that we work with and guide through this process. So if you're listening to this podcast, then there's a good chance that you're looking to create more freedom in your own life. There's also a good chance that you realize that owning your own business can be a great way to take more control of your livelihood and create more of that freedom that we're all looking for. Also, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you realize that I specialize in franchise ownership. In addition to owning franchise businesses myself, I have a franchise consulting firm, Path to Freedom, where I help people navigate what is typically an overwhelming process of understanding franchising, identifying specific franchise companies that could be a fit, and then conducting the due diligence in a thorough and efficient manner with those franchise brands. My whole purpose here is to leverage my experience working for franchisors, owning franchises myself, and how we've been able to use that to create more freedom in our lives and help you determine if that could be a path that makes sense for you as well. So if any of this sounds interesting, if you've considered business ownership in the past, whether you've explored franchising specifically or not, I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to learn more about you and what it is that you're working towards in your life and determine if I may be in a position to help. A great starting point is the link below in the show notes, which will take you to a short form to fill out, and you'll receive a free copy of an ebook that I've put together, The 7 Steps to Freedom Through Franchise Ownership. That'll also get us connected, and I'd love to set up an introductory call where I can explain a little bit more about the process that I use to help people determine if franchise ownership could be a great way to start charting their own path to freedom. So click the link below in the show notes, receive the ebook, and let's get connected. I'd love to hear from you. I got to thinking, and there's a reason that I'm recording this episode now, but I got to thinking that I've alluded to being a part of franchise. People that are in franchising certainly know franchise and kind of understand how all of this works and what the benefits are. But it struck me recently that this is something that would probably be worth spending a few minutes just giving you guys a little better understanding of how it works, because I think it absolutely puts me in a position to add more value to the people that I work with. And so the reason I decided to do this now is I was at a conference last week put on by Franchise, and we do this conference twice a year, and I think for the last couple of years I've recorded a short little episode like this, just kind of recapping some of my big takeaways from the conference. So we do this every year in January, we do it every year in July. All the franchisors that we work with come out, and so this is where I have a chance to really meet the people that are behind these brands in person and develop relationships with them. Founders, CEOs, the development representatives that are the ones that are kind of guiding people that I refer to them through the due diligence process. Franchising at the end of the day, it's a partnership. That's what it boils down to. It's a partnership between the franchisor and the franchisees. And just like in any partnership, you've got to know the people that you're partnering with. You've got to trust the people that you're partnering with. And so it's no different for me with these franchisors. I've already talked about the fact that I take it very seriously, and I want to have a lot of confidence in the brands and the people behind those brands that I may be referring people to. So getting together a couple times a year in person is fantastic in terms of just getting to continue to build on relationships, establish new relationships, right? I mean, we've got new brands coming in to the franchise network or portfolio on a fairly regular basis. And when I say new brands, in some cases those are emerging brands that are literally new to franchising and just coming on the scene and kind of greenfield opportunities. Or it could be a new brand in the sense that they're new to working with franchise, but not necessarily new to franchising. So in that case, going to these conferences is a great chance to start developing those relationships with the key people behind these brands. And there's so much learning that happens. The brands have a chance to kind of get up and give a more formal presentation, and they use that as an opportunity to give us updates, tell us about anything new or exciting, and that's all great. But to me, the real value and where most of my big takeaways come from coming out of one of these conferences is the discussions that you get into during the social events, right, at dinner, or at the happy hour, or in the lobby of the hotel. And you hear a lot of stories, and that's what always resonates with me the most, and what I kind of take home from these conferences is hearing the founder of a brand tell me a story about a franchisee that launched their business 6 months ago, and has just had incredible results, is breaking records. And not only is it just cool to hear that story, and to see how excited it makes the founder of this franchise brand, but it's through hearing these stories, right, and learning more about the types of franchisees that these brands have, and in particularly the types of franchisees that do really, really well within a brand. You get to kind of get a better feel for, well, what type of personality, or what are some of the characteristics of someone that would really thrive as a franchise owner with this brand. It's a lot of these stories that you hear that help me better understand who's going to be a good fit for a specific brand, which just makes it that much easier for me to make really good recommendations to the people that I'm working with. So this past week was no exception in terms of the value that I got out of this conference. And couple of kind of high level takeaways. Number one, if you turn on the news right now, it's scary as hell out there, right? We've got AI taking over. We've got wars going on, and the possibility of that escalating in one way or another. We've got inflation. We've got are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? There's banks failing over here, another bank failing over here. I'm depressing myself as I'm just kind of running down the list right now, but like it's scary if you just watch the news. But clearly the news, and I'm not to get political, it doesn't matter what news channel you're watching, the news has an agenda, right, that they're trying to push. And fear and negativity is what sells and drives the ratings, or at least historically has. So part of that agenda for any news channel out there is to just essentially try to scare the shit out of us, right? And they do a pretty good job if you're paying close attention. So one of my big takeaways was, that's not the dire state of the world that we live in right now, according to the mainstream media, has not put a damper on franchising and the amount of people that are investing in franchise businesses. And at first that may sound counterintuitive, right? Like, more people are investing in franchises. I mean, I don't think there was a single brand that I heard from last week out of hundreds that wasn't ahead of where they were last year in terms of the number of new franchisees that they added to their system. But also talking about all types of records that were being broken in terms of year over year increase in revenue for existing franchisees and things like that. I mean, there weren't really any of these brands that I heard from that were like, yeah, we're really taking it on the chin out there, or we're flat, or we're back. I mean, there's a lot of these businesses out there that were thriving, and the franchisees in these brands, so many of them are thriving. And so as I thought about it a little bit more, I mean, number one, like, franchise ownership always kind of has an inverse relationship with unemployment, right? So the more unemployment we see, a lot of times that motivates people to really take action on, maybe something they've thought about for a long time, owning their own business. So that part of it makes sense. But I think, at this point, 2023, we've had so much coming at us for 3+ years now in terms of, well, this is doomed and this is doomed, and just the constant nonstop, spew of fear and negativity coming at us, I think a lot of people out there have kind of had enough of it, and they said, you know what? I get it. There's a lot of crazy things happening right now, but that's life. That's how it's always been. I can't control most of that, right? But there are certain things that I can control. And, they look at business ownership as a way that they can take more control of their life and take more control of their livelihood, right? And put them in a position where they do have, more control. And I think that's my belief that that's a big part of what's, driving this kind of surge that we're seeing in, the interest in franchise ownership. And I think that's amazing. It was really nice to be at a conference like this last week where, you're surrounded with people that have a growth mindset, people that have the mindset that, hey, I'm gonna really focus on the things that I have the ability to control or some ability to impact. And I'm not gonna sit around and wait for the world to collapse or fall apart around me and just kind of cower. And, again, I'll go back to the stories, so many awesome stories about, franchise owners across hundreds of different brands that were doing the exact same thing, that were willing to take risk, willing to take action instead of just, sitting and holding while, they soak up all the fear and negativity that's floating around out there. They're just taking action, right? And getting it done and building businesses for themselves, putting themselves in a position where they've got more control over their outcomes, and ultimately their life. So anyways, it was a great week. Lot of brands I'm excited about, a lot of newer emerging brands that I'm really excited about. Gonna have a lot of cool podcasts coming out over the next couple of months. With brands, we'll continue to mix in some of the non, franchise podcast stuff as well. I personally really enjoy, obviously talking to people inside of franchising on the podcast, but I have a lot of fun talking to people, outside of franchising that are doing cool entrepreneurial things too. So we'll have some of that, but I've got quite a few, interviews with founders and CEOs of, newer brands that I'm working with. So stay tuned for that. But big message here was, again, I thought it'd be good to give a little more insight into, what is franchise? What does my relationship with franchise look like? Why is that valuable to me? Why does that put me in a position to add more value to the people that I work with? But also just to kind of, relay a message to everyone out there listening. Because, if you're listening to this and if you've been listening to it for some time, chances are like you've thought about this business ownership thing, and possibly thought about it for quite some time, or you may already own a business, right? Or multiple businesses, and you may just be the type of person that's always in growth mode, right? And always looking for, new opportunities, or at least learning, wanting to learn to get better and to continue to level up. Regardless, though, if you're listening to this, you're probably not the type that's, going to be comfortable just sitting and waiting to see, if all these scary, terrible things you're hearing on the news are actually going to come true or not. You're probably more the type of person that's like, you know what? There is a lot of crazy shit going on out there. And I want to be educated. I want to be aware, but I'm also not going to, sit here and just, focus on all of the what ifs. I'm going to get out there. I'm going to take some action. I'm going to control as much as I can control. And I'm going to take my life and my livelihood into my own hand. And so just wanted to relay to all of those folks out there. There's a lot of other people just like you out there. There's a lot of amazing people out there that are taking more control through building their own businesses. As I've said many times here on the podcast, franchising, I believe, is a phenomenal way for many people to get into business for themselves and to put themselves in that position where they have more control. But it's also not the only way, right? So Obviously there's so many amazing entrepreneurs and so many great success stories out there for people that have done it, outside of franchising. But franchising, when it's done right, is such a good vehicle for many, many people. And I'm a believer in it. It's had a huge impact on my life and my family's life. So the overall message for this podcast today is that there's a lot of hope, there's a lot of positivity, there's a lot of amazing people out there taking action, taking control, and building something for themselves. And so, if that's something that you've thought about, if it's something that maybe always been in the back of your mind and you just can't shake it, if what's going on in the world right now, or the possibilities of what could go on in the world right now has maybe held you back from really taking any action, don't do it. Don't let it hold you back. Take some action. And I'm not saying run out and sign a franchise agreement tomorrow and invest a bunch of money. I'm saying take some action in terms of keep finding podcasts to listen to, right? I could tell you 5 or 6 other great podcasts that give amazing information about franchise ownership, or just business ownership in general. Read books. Better yet, go to my website, fill out a form, set up a call with me, and let's have a conversation, right? And I'm happy to talk to anyone. Literally, I have time for anyone that just genuinely wants to learn more about franchise ownership, and what are some of the different ways that people get into it. What could that potentially look like for them? I've always got time for that call. I've got newsletters, obviously the podcast, really going to be working hard to put out more and more educational content going forward. So, an easy action step for anyone is, set up a call with me. If you don't want to talk to me, or don't think you're ready, to get on the phone yet, at least go to the website, subscribe to my newsletter, just start taking action and learning. That's one of the best things you can do to, put yourself in a position where you can start gaining more and more control, even in these very, uncertain times, it's seemingly uncertain times. So anyways, I feel like I've been rambling for like an hour now. Hopefully it's not been that long. We'll be back next week with, kind of the normal interview format, but just wanted to, share some of what was on my mind and what I've been up to lately. Thanks for all of you that listen on a regular basis. Please, like it, share it, subscribe it, pass it to someone else, all the things that the better podcasters than me say at the end to get you to stick with them. But appreciate all of you out there that listen. Thanks so much, and go drop in.